I'm Kim Saxon. I'm the RTDNAC Vice President, and I'm the News Director at WBTV in Charlotte. So Brad's comments were a really nice transition into our next session. So as journalists, we strive and you will strive to provide unbiased coverage. But the fact is we as people are not unbiased. You can't achieve a state of being unbiased as a human being. And we're not doing ourselves any favors if we pretend we don't have biases. So we are extremely lucky this morning to have a couple of exceptional people to lead our next session, which is called Know Your Biases. I have the pleasure of working with Dedrick Russell at WBTV in Charlotte, where he wears many hats. Dedrick is the co-host of one of our lifestyle shows. He is the executive producer of community content, overseeing our community conversation series. I'm running out of air here, I gotta keep going. He is also the chair of WBTV's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. He is on a committee for our ownership group, Gray, working on diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. And Dedrick is a former teacher, and you'll see why I put that in air quotes in a minute. Brett Chambers is a longtime RTDNAC board member and teaches at North Carolina Central University. And while Dedrick is a teacher turned journalist, Brett is a journalist turned teacher. So we've got two men here who have built really impressive careers out of their passion for education, journalism, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'm going to hand it over now to Dedrick Russell and Brett Chambers.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see all these wonderful faces and hear from all the young folks, the students. And it's also a joy for me to be on a panel with a good friend, my fraternity brother, a fellow NABJer. Actually, Dedrick used to be my regional director so when I was president of my chapter in Raleigh-Durham. So this is something we do out of love, as Brad talked about, but it also reminds us why we are doing what we're doing. So I want to introduce my good friend, frat brother, and fellow journalist, Dedrick Russell. You're going to take us through the biases, and I'm going to go along for the ride.
Well, hey, we'll buckle up because we're going to have a good ride ahead of us. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for showing up for I believe that you showing up today will make a difference, not only in your life, but also in your professional life. And that's what it's all about. We're all teachers, so I believe knowledge is power. So know your biases. So as a teacher, I always go over what is the mission for the session. We always go over our objectives. We're going to have an engaging conversation. I am not the only one. Brett will not be the only one talking. You guys have proven that you guys can talk early in the morning. So we're going to keep that up. So I need for you to participate because I believe the more you put into this, the more you will get out of it. Also, if you want to say something, say it. Say it. Speak up. You can use the chat feature. Let us know what you have to say. As Brad was saying, all viewpoints are welcomed. I love it. I love diversity of thought because I think that makes a difference. I think we're stronger because of our differences, not because of our similarities. So all viewpoints are welcome here. I won't get mad at you if you don't see it the way I see it. That's fine. And if you get into a newsroom, you will quickly find out that everybody does not see it your way. So, so all viewpoints are welcomed in this session. We're going to learn different types of biases here. We're going to give some examples. And there are, in studying for this, there are a lot of biases out there. So the ones we do not tackle today, I encourage you to find out all the biases out there. So when you get that first job, you will know that bias and make sure you're not heading down that road. And then at the end, there's always a call to action. We will have a call to action at the end of this, so you will know at the end of this session what you need to do. Okay, everybody ready to go for the ride? All right, let's go. I always like to start with food. Doesn't that look good? So let me know. We're going to start with food. French fries. I love French fries, especially if they're hot, lightly salted, a little seasoned salt. It's good. So listen, I want you to let me know in your mind, who has the best French fries? Put it in the chat right now. Send it in the chat. Who has the best French fries? Let's see. Who has, wow. Y'all came. So let me see. So Victoria, you say McDonald's. Why do you say McDonald's has the best French fries, Victoria?
They're salty and greasy and thin and crispy and wonderful.
Oh, you get a hand clap. You get a hand clap. Now, Jendaya, you say Chick-fil-A. Why do you say Chick-fil-A, Jendaya?
I just love the waffle fries, and I believe that they're salty and they're just right. You can dip it in the Chick-fil-A sauce, and it's just perfect.
Oh, okay. Angel, you say Wendy's. Angel, why do you say Wendy's?
I just feel like it's the perfect ratio of like crispiness to like potato, and they taste amazing in ketchup. So
Wow, wow. So so Angel, I'm just calling you Wendy. So Angel, can you convince Jendaya that Wendy's has the best French fries? Can you do that in one sentence? What would you say to convince her that she is wrong about Chick-fil-A having the best fries and Wendy's has the best fries?
Sorry, I was muted. Say that
Wendy's
again.
fries go with everything on their menu, unlike
Okay.
Chick-fil-A's. Because Wendy's,
Ooh.
you can dip your fries in Frosties.
Oh, Jendaya, what do you have to say about that?
She did bring up a valid point. You can frosting. I do enjoy that, so I agree.
So did she convince you?
She convinced me.
Oh, wow. So now you say Wendy's has better fries than Chick-fil-A?
I wouldn't say that. I would believe that they're both equally good.
Both equally good. Okay then. All right then. Okay then. So everybody has said Five Guys. Brad says Five Guys and Cajun fries. Okay. All right. And Red Robin. Okay. So everybody, Smash Burger, Brian, Smash Burger. Why you like Smash Burger fries? Brad Hyatt, the little fries. You like the little fries? So listen, this right here has proven that everybody has a bias. Everybody has a bias. So people think that Wendy's, Chick-fil-A, that's your preference. And I'm here to say that, that you can have a bias. There's nothing wrong with having a bias. But what we have to do in the news world, we have to make sure that we manage our biases. And when our biases get into our storytelling and get into what we cover and what we don't cover, then you're headed down a bad road. So we're going to talk about that. So you have proven that you guys are biased. All of you are biased. You're biased. Okay. So let's go. So what is the definition of bias? Bias, prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way considered to be unfair. That is the definition of bias. And when you look at the synonyms, favoritism. And the media, we're always accused of having favoritism, favoring one person over another or one story over another. So that is the definition of bias. Okay? Know your biases. Now, when it says media bias is a bias or perceived bias of journalists within the mass media in the selection of events and stories that are reported and how they are covered. And what's interesting in this definition, perceived bias, just a thought. And people have a thought that, oh, you're biased already. Even before you say one word, I think you're biased. So media bias. And so how do we control that and convince people that we are unbiased, media bias. Okay. So listen, let's play this game. Biased or not. This is Serena Williams back in 2018, the US Open. And remember, the umpire accused her of cheating. And she was upset. So let me know in the chat, do you think this is a political cartoon. So let me see if you see any bias in here. Is it biased? Okay, Regina Cobb, why do you say it's biased, Regina?
I
Regina
think it's
Cobb?
biased. Oh, Desiree, I think it's biased because it's showing the angry Black woman. She's angry because she lost, so she's having a tantrum. Where in the background you see the person who won is perky and has blonde hair and just looking like she's just chilling. She's supposed to win, so this is how she's supposed to look. Serena doesn't look like this. She's not even this big, and she did get upset, but this just made it just seem like every Black woman that loses or don't get their way, they just angry. So this image makes me think angry Black woman.
Wow. Bias, bias, bias. And Kathy wrote, they make her look fat. Uh-huh. Yep. Okay. Does anybody think that this is not biased? There's nothing wrong with this. If you do, put it in the chat, say nothing's wrong, or if you want to just speak up, does everybody think this is biased? Okay. All right. So we know that we have struggled with bias, especially when it comes to African Americans. So what I'm here to tell you is that this country is getting more, yeah, Kathy is also a pacifier on the ground, correct? I'm glad you pointed that out. Like she's whining and she needs a pacifier and things like that. And only thing the story was is that she said she never cheats. And so when the umpire accused her of cheating, and so she was saying that she's a mother and she wants to set a good example. So that really just made her upset. But was this warranted? It's bias. But I want to say that with bias, that African Americans have always been treated like this. And so as America and this world gets more diverse, that we need to be able to handle our bias, because not only is there bias against color, there's bias against age, gender, physical abilities, religion, sexual orientation, and weight. So we have to be able to keep in mind all of the biases that are out there. Okay, let's go to this one. What do you think about this? Is this bias? Oh snap, I forgot to put your names on the list. Is this bias? Put it in the chat if you think it's bias.
And while they're putting it in the chat, Dedrick, I'd even like to raise the question for your previous one. Would Serena or someone that was showing the same behavior be depicted differently if she had a different body type or a different ethnicity?
Go ahead, Jendaya.
Or even a different age?
Say that because I forgot his name, but he's a big tennis player. And he also like has a lot of attitude problems and stuff like that. But since he's a male, they don't really they just see it as him like showing his anger. They don't really say that he's being, giving him like a different like stereotype or something like that. Like they just see him as being an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
We use the term competitive as what we use for men. So.
Wow. Thank you, Brad. Yep, absolutely. So everybody agrees. So is it Cassia? Cassia? You say this is a hard one. Why do you say this is a hard one?
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Cassia.
Cassia.
I said this is a hard one just because while a majority of publications like this, they are going to be biased to some extent, but the biases sometimes reflect the world as it is. And so if Club USA is forgetting to include all of these different religions, that bias might be accurately reflecting, what the piece is trying to convey. So it can be biased, but still be right in a way. It's a difficult thing to work through. So I don't want to say it's not biased because there's always bias, but it can still be accurate if it's biased in this piece, for example.
Does anybody want to weigh in on that?
Well, I was going to say, I think you're saying that maybe the purpose of this is to expose bias.
Yes, absolutely.
Gotcha. Okay. And Kim, you said, no, I think this cartoon is art designed to expose the point that bias exists. Correct. Exactly. And you see the Club USA. So who's coming into Club USA? You know, and all of these people are not in Club USA. Good point. Good point. Good point. So listen, there are two biases, you know, implicit bias. We all know implicit bias, unconscious association, belief, attitude towards a social group. Because of this, people often attribute certain qualities or characteristics to all members of the group. Implicit bias, you do that unconscious and you do that. Explicit bias means you're just aware. You're just aware of your prejudices and attitudes towards certain people, and you are fine with it. You're fine with it. All right. Let's go a little deeper. Now, I want you to take a look at this, and we will talk about this after you watch this. Okay.
Funny how the media covers white riots versus black protests. News. Seems like when the protesters are black, the media uses some pretty harsh words.
The bad guys. Lawlessness, looting, wild animals,
criminals, and thugs.
Thugs. Isn't it the right word?
However, if you're white and you're tearing up the city because of a game, you're just young people.
Young people danced on a flipped over car. His UK fans did stupid things.
Some maybe got a little out of control.
Seeing a scene like this just shows how passionate the UK fans are.
It's so tough to lose, and unfortunately the ugly side that we sometimes see in sports.
And notice how the police always show up to a black protest in military-grade equipment, and yet the media claims they're just doing nothing.
It's inexplicable why the police are doing nothing.
Let's mobilize the National Guard.
If I'm a riot and I see the police doing nothing, I might feel like I have a license.
You would.
But at white riots, the cops actually are standing around doing nothing.
Another group of cops over there just standing there.
No one was really doing anything.
These guys look like they could be watching a parade. And why is it that the leadership of the black community is always called into question?
Where is the leadership?
Leadership.
The black leadership.
The absence of leadership.
And it goes back to leadership, but that leadership has to come from the community.
But no one ever questions the leadership of white parents who let their kids burn down and vandalize their college campus.
These are just young college students who think they're playing some kind of a game with police officers.
You know, sometimes they don't even call a white riot a riot.
Party gone awry.
Some fans got a bit too rowdy after the win.
Dispute, a bloody brawl.
There was some type of altercation.
Waco, 170 arrested, 9 people dead.
They're not thugs.
Baltimore, no deaths, but it's a riot, chock full of thugs.
Thugs.
Just thugs.
What if the media portrayed white rioters the same as black protesters? Let's switch the audio and see how it plays out.
Breaking news, violent protest.
What you're looking at is the unraveling of the civil society.
Criminals and thugs.
And they're raising hell and they're destroying property.
These idiotic thugs, rioting and looting, are hurting their own people.
Wild animals burning buildings down.
Especially if they know the media's all there, right? Got the cameras on everyone. It's become its own reality show.
Who acts like that towards a police officer?
Think for yourself. Don't let racist media color your perceptions. Demand fairness in media coverage. Tell the media to put an end to calling black people thugs.
Okay. What did you guys think of that? What stood out to you in that that clip right there?
I'll just say I think it's very important that we discuss the topic. I'm actually working on a story right now for my NABJ chapter at USC about the Capitol insurrection and how the double standard is, how deafening the double standard is, and how Black people's lives get taken if we turn our music up loud, but if the opposite storms the Capitol, they get selfies with the officers. So I definitely think it's important that we talk about it. And I really appreciate that they switched the audio so we can see just how people are talked about and the difference in how they're represented.
Exactly, exactly. And that bias, like Regine, that double standard. So, you know, what stood out to me is that when it's Black rioters, they say, where's the leadership? Where's the leadership? But if the white rioters, they don't ask where the leadership, or they say that party gone awry. So, you know, so those biases are there. So we just have to be very careful about those biases. Now, that was shot back in 2015. So you have your hand raised, and Jendaya?
I'll let the people go before me because I saw a lot of people had their hands up way before me.
3 participants have their hand raised. Yes. Okay, Paige.
Thanks, Jedi. You didn't have to do that. But Yeah, so I'm a student at the University of South Carolina, and we have a few electives, like journalism electives, and I had one last semester where we talked a lot about that. And I remember one example we had was we were talking sort of about like the verbiage that they use when it's Black riots or whatever versus white riots. And another example that we talked about that I remember specifically was how they used specific words when it came to the reporting about Hurricane Katrina. And it was a lot of like just very different. Like they would say when talking about people of color, they would say things like looting and just very different verbiage that was kind of similar to this. And this is what that sort of reminded me of. So we definitely talk about that a lot in our classes too now.
Good
And
stuff.
Paige, I'd like for you to add perspective because the example I was going to share was when Anderson Cooper was sitting on the anchor desk, he kept referring to them as looters and I can't believe these people are doing this. When he got to New Orleans, he was one of the loudest voices saying, somebody needs to get down here and help these people. They're trying to survive. And he was referring to the same people that he had called looters and thugs when he was on the anchor desk. So being in a nice air-conditioned studio as opposed to the sweltering humidity and the situation in New Orleans changed his context, which changed his perception.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Gotcha. Yeah, Tolupe. Yeah.
And then Jediah.
Something that I agree with Paige about is like the words that they use to describe people. It's just very telling. A lot of it is like racially charged and people might not even realize it. Something I noticed was that when they were talking about the Black protests, someone referred to them as animals. And I think that like stems from a lot of racist history in America and how Black people were perceived like ever since slavery and like everything after that. And another thing that stood out to me was like the mention of like, where is their leadership? I feel like the reason that nobody is asking white people where their leadership is because they're in leadership and it's not changing how they react to these things. And it's almost telling that like Black people are not in leadership positions because of just the way the world has been. And it's not because they're not capable, but just because of the way that systemically leadership might treat Black people in comparison to white people and just minorities in general. So I thought that was a standout.
Good point. Good point.
And Dedrick, that she points out a very good point that we talk about, especially around our board table about representation matters, and also within NABJ, is that you want to have people that are gatekeepers that represent the communities that you cover, because they'll bring a different perspective, and you want to have a diversity of whatever group that you have around the table. It's not just always the color diversity, it's the thought process diversity and the background diversity. I see you nodding your head, Rich. Go ahead and say something.
No, it's absolutely right. I think the diversity goes far beyond the visual. It's also we don't have in our newsrooms a lot of difference in terms of socioeconomic background. We turn out everyone on this call is a college student. It used to be a blue collar business. It used to be a place where a lot of working people were part of the news industry. And I think that's not represented as well in our newsrooms as it once was. I wonder about political thought in our newsrooms. Do we have people on the left? Do we have people on the right? Do we have people in the middle? And are those views respected as well? And a larger point too, and this is something I think about a lot after the events of January 6th, is the ethnocentric lens that we put on everything. And a couple people did this. If the same event had happened in Vilnius, Lithuania, it would not be described as a protest that got out of hand.
Right.
It would be described incredibly differently. So, I think all of this is, it's a huge pot, and it's sometimes very hard for us to wrap our heads around it. But I think our business is worse for it if we don't.
Thank you.
Jediah, and then Jediah.
Yeah.
I was going to say that with the events that happened on January 6th, I would see that as a terrorist act, but instead of them calling it a terrorist act, they called them patriots instead of calling them terrorists. They all went and invaded like Nancy Pelosi's like office. They wanted to hurt senators and stuff like that. And I felt like that's when they had the opportunity to call them terrorists, but they didn't.
Who is the they in that statement, though? Because I would also say that there are a lot of theys, and different people and journalists and organizations approach that very differently, and it changed over time.
Definitely. But at that time, it was like right when journalists, when it first happened, they were calling them patriots instead of terrorists. And then they later on started to say that they were doing a terrorist act.
The last comment is Katia, and then we'll move on. Is it Katia? Did I pronounce that correctly?
It's Katia.
Katia, okay.
Yeah. I just had a question, not so much about bias, but you guys' opinion on, I guess you would say, code switching, because I remember I saw a video a couple days ago on Twitter, and this lady was an HR representative, and she was a person of color, and she was giving advice saying, if you have a difficult or ghetto name, use your middle name in order to get into places that you want to go. I wanted to know you guys' opinion on that, and what you thought about that, because my name, nobody can pronounce my name.
Right, yeah. So I guess, is there a bias with your resume?
Yes.
That do hiring managers, are they biased when they look at resumes? Anybody want to tackle that?
I'll address it because I've been in different situations as far as hiring, and there are things that you can control and there are things you can't control. Because when people are hiding behind anonymity because they're looking at something, their biases they can kick in unbridled, so to speak, unchecked. So you're not going to know that your name was what got you like passed over, which triggered something else in their bias. It's just like with pictures. I tell my students, don't put your picture on your resume. They'll see your reel at some point, but hopefully they'll see it after they've like passed your resume. It's just that what you're saying is absolutely true, though, that we've done it with hairstyles, hair color. Blue hair sometimes doesn't work with certain managers. Some other managers probably wouldn't care that much. They probably say, oh, good, it will appeal to a different demographic. Let's go get them while the other station isn't. It'll give them a competitive advantage. Others will say somebody's name may offend some of our demographic. So it's for some of the managers, it's going to depend on what their personal biases are, what their corporate biases are, what their newsroom's culture is like. So, and some of them are just really subtle. So it's not always a big code switch thing. Sometimes it's just really subtle.
I'll also say it depends on whether you're going to be on air or not, too. I mean, if you have purple hair and you want to be a producer, that's probably going to be okay. If you have purple hair and you want to be on air, and that's probably not gonna get past the news director. So also consider the position you're applying for. For the record, when I was a teenager, I had purple hair, so.
I was just going to add that when I got into the business, I was a reporter and I was on air. And my first job, they encouraged me to change my last name because Spechko was hard to say, it was hard to spell, and it kind of looked funky. And Victoria Spechko was very long. And they asked me, do you have a middle name that you can use or whatever? And at the end of the day, I just had to be true to myself. That's who I am. And I never changed it. And I still use it today, even though I'm married, my last name is different. So you have to be true to yourself. And I think, I can't remember if it was Brett that made the point. You're not always going to know, because if they've just reviewed your resume and tossed it because they don't think your name is going to work for them, you're not going to know. But once you get in, then you really have to advocate for yourself. Like Kathy said, there are, things like purple hair on the air is not necessarily going to work, but there are reporters who have made things work that we never thought they would either. So it is about knowing yourself and your boundaries and being true to who you are.
And Costner, I was going to say, Costner was a problem for some managers when I first started out.
So
I wanted to.
I don't know. I don't know if I'd want to work for a place that would want me to change my name.
Yeah.
I mean, I listen. I'm not saying I have the perfect newsroom, but name doesn't matter. And quite frankly, natural hair doesn't matter. I had a reporter come in, and I didn't know this, who came in and she was extremely emotional and she was frightened. And she said, "I want to go to my natural hair." And I said, "Okay, go." I'm okay with that. I think you have to find the right culture in the newsroom that fits who you are. And I think that that's really important as well. And it goes back to staying true to yourself.
I kind of agree with Kevin. I'm sorry. I kind of agree with Kevin on that as a news director. I have people who have maybe odd sounding last names. I've never asked someone to change their last name or something like that. Hey, that's who you are. That's who your the mom and dad named you. That's what it is. And you want to find a place that's going to embrace who you are, and that's myself personally. Just you have to be true to yourself, and you want to find a newsroom that's going to embrace who you are.
That's good. That's good. We're going to have Rick will be the last person to comment on this. I know, Rick, your hand has been up for a while.
Thanks, Dedrick. Rick Gall, news director at WRAL in Raleigh. When it comes to putting your name on a resume or in an email, you are who you are. If that's your name and you're proud of it, then put it down. Because if somebody's going to pass you up or look past you because of your name, that's probably not the place you want to work. I mean, you don't want to be in that environment. You want to be in an environment where people are going to welcome you and embrace you, and that starts with your name. I mean, I would hope that we're reaching a point in this business that someone's name is not a reason to look past them. And in fact, as more and more employers recognize the significance of diversity in newsrooms, actually putting your name down may actually help you. May get you a look that maybe you didn't, you may have been passed over otherwise. Embrace who you are and be proud of that. Don't let someone talk you out of that. You gotta be who you are.
Just real quick, Dedrick, since we have Rick talking, Rick had a reporter that in this market, in the Raleigh-Durham market, she had twists, and a lot of people, we used to talk about her a lot in class. And I always applauded Rick just for just doing what he does, which is he wants to get the best person he can because he likes staying number one for some reason. But I'd like for him to just talk about if there was any conversation about that, or was it just a non-issue because she was just good at what she did?
So I think you're probably referring to Candace Sweat, who worked here for a number of years and has moved on to a station in Dallas, where she's from. Yes, Candace came in and she wore her hair naturally and wore her hair in, her hairstyle changed over time. We welcome that, we embrace that. I think, when it comes to appearance, there are some boundaries there. Purple hair would probably be an issue on our air, but I think we need to recognize that, different people see things in different ways, and we have to embrace different people, different races, different ethnicities, and there are a lot of layers to that. It's not as simple as saying, well, we're a diverse newsroom and we welcome people, from different races and ethnicities. You have to live that. And I think for African Americans, I think especially African American women, hairstyle is a very big issue. And if you watch us, you'll see that we embrace that. I think that's really important. I think you're going to see more of that in this business as time goes on. And I think it's important.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Let's fast forward to the events that happened just last year, the George Floyd protests. These are images taken from the George Floyd protest. Just in the chat, how did you think the media handled that protest? Did you think that when you saw someone covering the George Floyd protest, that the media portrayed it as a dangerous event, as a mob mentality? Just give me some adjectives of how you would describe how the media, I guess right in your area, how the media described and portrayed George Floyd protests, and what feeling did you get after they did those stories? Let's see. Dangerous. Hanson said dangerous. Talk to me about that, Hanson. You thought it was dangerous that they portrayed it as dangerous?
I didn't think it was dangerous that they portrayed it as dangerous, but I'm watching the news and they're like, folks, please stay at home. Make sure that you are indoors and you are safe. Like it's a shooter on the loose or something like that. And I just felt that some news stations, they did, maybe you could call this a bias. They understood what was going on and how the Black community was just, kind of fed up with all of the injustice that was going on. So I don't think it was dangerous that they portrayed it as dangerous. I just didn't like how they made it, look. But yes, it was what it was. But there was reason to that.
Okay. And Kasi, I like the media focus less on the event that caused it and more on what happened during the protests. Okay. Kim says huge differences among different networks and national media versus local media. That is true. And then Kathy, I think it depends on the city and situation. There were some protests that were peaceful and people simply walked, others where windows were broken and fires were set. Gotcha. Channel bias. Yeah, gotcha. But you know what? I did some research and look what I found. 93% of the Black Lives Matter protests have been peaceful. And that is according to a report. Here's the report. The Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, they looked at more than 7,750 Black Lives Matter demonstrations in all 50 states and DC from May 26th to August 22nd. The report states that more than 2,400 locations reported peaceful protests, fewer than 220 reported violent demonstrations. Still, many people believe that the Black Lives Matter protests are largely violent. And I guess that depends on where you were and which channel you watched. And even if you watched the channel where there were disruptions and things like that, did the media follow up and say, hey, that most of these demonstrations are peaceful, but there are some people who get out of hand and things like that? And did you know that a Norwegian lawyer has nominated Black Lives Matter movement for a Nobel Peace Prize? Did the media say that? Did people know that the Black Lives Matter movement nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize for the work that it has done to bring about racial justice? A winner will be announced in October. So Kim says, people think you can't be peaceful and angry. You can be both. Elaborate on that, Kim.
Find my unmute button. This is a conversation, Dedrick, we have these conversations a lot in our newsroom. Sometimes we get it right. Sometimes we're a little off, but you can have a peaceful, lawful protest with people who are really pissed off. Just because someone is angry doesn't mean they are breaking the law, that they are doing something wrong. If you're going to have a protest that large, there's probably a reason people are angry. And we shouldn't confuse those things.
Right. I agree. And then also, bias, tell the whole story. If there were some disruptions, then there were some peaceful. If there were some disruptions, then this movement, got nominated for Nobel Peace Prize. So we have to let our audience know the whole story. So I thought that was very, very telling. I want us to watch this video real quick. It's about a 5-minute video, but I thought it was just, it's real telling. And then we'll move on, okay?
Minneapolis on fire.
This is getting serious. Oh my goodness.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You watch the TV news.
We got a little bit of a fire breaking out on the left here.
And you're like, oh my goodness, all the protests are riots.
Vandalizing.
Fires have been started.
Things got out of control.
We're not going to pay attention to the protesters in a city that has been racked by this violence. We're marching peacefully.
Oh, I'm sorry. I keep clicking. I'm sorry. I'm gonna stop clicking.
And chanting names. Which is going to get more attention? A group of 35 people standing, chanting names, singing songs, doing the Cupid shuffle, as I saw one group of protesters doing, or 5 people on the ground bleeding and screaming and crying and throwing rocks. Our press is driven by eyeballs and attention and clicks and advertising and passion and raising the anxiety of viewers.
Dramatic images are money. They keep eyeballs on the screen, so they will constantly show action. You need to understand the limitations of those visuals.
I'm a college professor. My doctorate's in political science. I teach in a journalism department. I would say across the board, the coverage has not been very good. It's passing, but it's not very good. And the reason it's not very good is because there are not enough conversations about the roots of these protests.
What they're showing you is what is happening right now on the ground. What those visuals cannot tell you is the entire historical context that has led to that scene on the ground. And one thing that a lot of mainstream media doesn't do well is give you that full context. You can't untangle this moment from where we are just in this year, starting with February with the coronavirus, Ahmaud Arbery's lynching, having people in shelter in place, having people become angry that they are in shelter in place orders, having the economy, significantly slow down. There are so many events just since January that led up to this moment, not to mention the hundreds of years before that. This becomes a very complicated story.
Come to me right now. This woman just got tased.
Who is to blame for the violence? It is crazy that when we talk about destruction of property, that the presumption is that the unarmed people who are protesting are more likely to cause property destruction than the paramilitary cops who are showing up. Because tear gas canisters are really hot. Flash bombs can start fires. Tear gas leads people to run and break through windows in order to hide and get help. I'm not saying the police are intending to cause damage, but if you're randomly shooting out tear gas, it's gonna end up in the back alley with a pile of newspapers and some garbage. Does that mean that there aren't protesters who engage in destruction? Of course there are. To say that all this is turning to looters is like saying everybody at the party is a drunk driver. No, some people will leave and cause problems, but you can't say everybody at the party is the worst behaving person.
I think one thing that we actually don't do well and don't quite understand is anti-Blackness and how it works in our society, how it is in our language, and how it is used by mainstream media.
We have spent the last month watching protests who want the country to open up. And we saw images of these people screaming and yelling and spitting on police officers who were plainclothes officers. They weren't in riot gear, they weren't in masks. Now we see protests based on violence and death. And we see peaceful protesters come out, but suddenly the cops come out in riot gear and everything looks like, some sort of violent takeover in some 80s post-apocalyptic film.
What I'm reminded of are photos in New Orleans of white people leaving stores with food and the headline being, "This is how people are surviving," and Black folks leaving the store with food and calling them looters. This is about a community that is treated differently by the police in our country. Just consuming the news right now in the next 5 days is not going to give you a good understanding as to why this is happening.
It's the emails I get where people say, well, I was in favor of the protesters, and then they turned violent and it's a problem. Well, why are you more offended by people being violent in response to state-sponsored violence than you are by the initial act that caused everything?
Okay. Any comments? We're going to just spend a few minutes on that. I mean, when I saw this, I was like, wow. I mean, they just laid it out there. And I think that as media, we have the responsibility that we can, give context to things. And I just wanted to see what you had to say about this. Let me see. We had some people who raised their hands. Let's see.
We didn't get, I think Tululepe's had her hand up for a while now.
Okay, then, all right, then you quickly, and then we'll go on because I got 10 minutes left.
Yeah, we go from Tululepe to Angel. Let's get to.
Sorry, I forgot to put mine down from before.
Okay, then.
Okay, Angel.
All right, then.
Yeah, I just want to say real quick, that gave me a very interesting perspective, and it was extremely powerful to watch. And it really reinforces the idea that there should be a balance between the good stuff and the bad stuff. And what I mean by that is there should be a balance between, people in the media, obviously, like, they're attracted to that violence, they're attracted to those images. But when I saw those people doing the Cupid shuffle in the street, like, I had never seen that before. And that was something that I'd be wanting to see, that silver lining, to see how people are responding to that. And so I think as journalists, as media, we need to do a better job at balancing that.
Thank you. Let's tackle these biases. Angel, can you do it 30 seconds in Angel?
Sorry, say that again.
Oh, you already went. Okay, then. All right, then.
I was saying,
let's tackle.
Rick's hand was up.
Okay, then. Rick, you want to say something real quick?
Yeah, I'll try to be quick on this. I think this becomes unfortunately easily apparent in the protest coverage, but we've got to look out for assumptions and narratives in regular news coverage. We had a deputy who was shot along an interstate here, and the sheriff pulls out this long rap sheet, African-American suspect, and it would have been easy enough to have stopped there. But one of our reporters found the guy's father in Florida, who really didn't even know about this until we shared the details with him about what had happened with that traffic stop that went wrong. And this is not to excuse what happened in the traffic stop, but when we talked to this guy's father, he explained his son was a veteran who had PTSD, mental health issues, and had stopped taking his medication. That does not excuse what happened on the interstate, but it provides perspective. It gets into the societal issues that are behind some of these things that are happening. And if we simply just show up, cover the scene, let the law enforcement, officials just give us their take and walk away from that, we have done a great disservice to the community. And so I think we've got to really be careful with assumptions and narratives. If you've heard it before, stop. Don't think that's what's playing out this time. It may not be. And that's incumbent upon all of us in news to really be looking for those types of things.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Rick. We're going to hit these biases real quick. Know your biases. Omission bias, leaving one side of an article out or a series of articles over a period of time, avoiding coverage. By being one-sided, viewers get a skewed or biased perspective. So we have omission bias when you go into the editorial meetings. What are we going to cover? What are we not going to cover? Should we cover this story? Or so you have an omission bias in your editorial. Now, you're not saying that you're not going to cover this story because you don't want to cover it. You may not cover it because you don't have the resources, but then you have to prioritize and say, hey, which one is important? Which one do we need to cover? So we have an omission bias, leaving one side of an article out or a series of articles out over a period of time. Okay, that's omission bias. And here was omission bias, an example. So Barack Obama speaking, and we always hear boo, boo, boo. So are people booing? And you always say, you know, Barack Obama was greeted by jeers at his latest speech. So if 30,000 people were at the speech and you had 10 people who booed, does that say your remarks greeted by jeers, or is it just a handful of people who disagree with what Obama was saying? So, you know, so I've heard it in texts where stories that say that this person was greeted by jeers, but how many people did that? And so when we say, you know, greeted by jeers and there are only 2 people who are booing, then what perspective are we giving our audience that we're saying that this person, the speaker, is unwanted, or a lot of people disagree with him? So that's omission bias. Headline bias, headline bias. These are headline bias and the banners that we have on the TV screens where people may just be coming in the middle of a story and they're just reading the headline. What will they get? Headline bias can be misleading, conveying excitement when the story is not exciting, and can express approval or disapproval. So we have to be careful with our headline bias. Look at this headline that we all know about Bill Cosby. This headline from the New York Times: judge allows testimony of another accuser in Cosby case. Judge allows testimony of another accuser in Cosby case. So when you read this, you probably say, oh my goodness, here we go again. Here's going to be another person and another person that's going to come out and testify against Bill Cosby. So this is another headline from the same story, but let's see if you see the headline bias. So judge allows testimony of another accuser in Cosby case. Look at this headline: Bill Cosby sex assault trial. Judge allows only one other accuser to testify, not 13. Do you see the difference in the headline? So the other headline, all excited, oh my goodness, a bunch of people are coming out. But the real story is that the judge only allowed one and refused the other 13 to testify. Headline bias, headline bias. Placement bias. Stories that a media outlet features above the fold or prominently on its homepage or website to show the customer or viewer which stories they want them to read. So these are for all the college students who have newspapers. What is above the fold? You know, even if they read nothing else on the site or in the publication, whatever you put out there, however you place it, that you're showing your bias and you're saying that, hey, I think that this is the story you need to read. This is the story you need, and you know, on your websites and things like that. So here we go. Since Tiger Woods was in the news, we're sending prayers and comfort to Tiger. But back in 2000, Time magazine, Tiger Woods wins Time's cover space on the August 14th, 2000 page. But you know what was also happening in 2000 was the coverage of the Republican National Convention. That didn't get played. That was on page 26. While Tiger, he got the front page. So some people would say that is this headline bias, that we want you to know about Tiger's tail instead of who may be the next leader of the free world. So headline bias. Confirmation bias, confirmation bias, tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms one's belief. So who do you follow? Who do you get your news from? You know, because who you get your news from sometimes is what you believe. And so therefore, when you have to do a story, if you just are in that circle, that you're probably going to have a confirmation bias because you're going to lean to what you've already heard. You're going to lean to what you already believe. Here's a cartoon I found. I already wrote the paper. That's why it's so hard to get the right data. She already wrote the paper. She's already confirmed her hypothesis or her belief. So how many times have you said, I already wrote the story? So I can't put the facts in there because I already wrote the story, you know? So one exercise that I always ask the reporters and MMJs to do is that before you go out on a story, write your heading, write your lead. And then at the end of the day, after you have gathered all your facts and talked to all your sources and things like that, at the end of the day, if what you wrote before you started the story is the same as you ended with the story, then that could be a little confirmation bias because we're supposed to find some new things and things like that. So confirmation bias. Concision bias. You choose stories that can be summed up in a few words rather than require a lengthier explanation. We have that bias in the newsroom. Hey, I can get this story done in a minute 30, but this other story is going to be a little longer. So therefore, we have concision bias. You choose stories that can be summed up in a few words rather than require a lengthier explanation. Okay? All right, then. I know you got that. So here's a call to action. I found this, and I did not know a news station did this, and I think it is great. So let's watch this, and then we'll go for call to action.
And I'm Cami Deerking. Our greatest responsibility is to serve our tri-state communities. We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that Local 12 produces.
But we are concerned about the troubling trend of irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fabricated stories without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
At Local 12, it's our responsibility to report and pursue the truth. We understand that truth is neither politically left or right.
Our commitment to factual reporting is our foundation of credibility, now more than ever. But we are human, and sometimes our reporting might fall short.
If you believe our coverage is unfair, please reach out through our website, local12.com, by clicking on Content Concerns. We value your comments. We will respond.
We work very hard to seek the truth and strive to be fair, balanced, and factual. We consider it our honor and privilege to responsibly deliver the news every day. And thank you for watching, and we appreciate your feedback.
If you believe our coverage is unfair, please reach out through our website, local12.com, by clicking on Content Concerns.
In Cincinnati, so last night I went on the website to see if it was still there. Their content card is still in play. So they are asking, and that's a way to engage the public, that if you have a concern, then you have a way to reach out to us and the station can correct and address and things like that. But the call to action is that everybody on this call is a gatekeeper. A gatekeeper, whether if you're on your college newspaper or whether you're on your college TV station, you have a call to action to make sure that biases are recognized, that it is addressed, and that you manage it, that you manage the bias, so you can give the whole context, because people are depending on you. And that's why I am so glad that you are coming into the journalism profession so that we can change these things and so that people can have the right picture of their community, of the world, of the country, of their neighborhood, of their block. So I applaud everybody on this call. I hope you know your biases. And I hope you've learned something. This is my information. If you need to get in contact with me, that's my email address, telephone number, Twitter. But yes, so I think, are we out of time, Brother Brett? I'll turn this over to Brother.
Yes, brother. We crammed a lot in there, buddy. And we like to thank everybody for their participation, their input, because the conversation is what brings up a lot of these biases and helps us address them so we can recognize them and, as Dedrick points out, manage them. So thank you, and thank you, RTDNAC, and thank you, Kim, for bringing Dedrick to us. All right, thank you. We turn it back over to you, Kim.